The law office smelled like leather and old money. I sat in the corner chair, watching dust particles dance through the afternoon sunlight streaming across mahogany furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. 23 family members packed into Edmund Cartwright's conference room, all dressed in their funeral best, all waiting to hear how my grandfather's fortune would be divided. I'd worn a simple black dress, nothing fancy. My hands rested in my lap, and I kept my expression neutral while my relatives whispered and speculated around me. The downtown properties alone are worth millions, Aunt Patricia murmured to her husband Gerald. Father owned half the commercial district. Don't forget the investment portfolio, Gerald whispered back. Tech stocks, municipal bonds, that pharmaceutical company. My cousin Melissa leaned toward her mother. Do you think grandfather left me the beach house? He always said I reminded him of grandmother when she was young. I tuned them out. I'd heard enough speculation over the past week to last a lifetime. At the funeral, various aunts and uncles had already begun positioning themselves, reminding each other of promises my grandfather supposedly made, recounting how they'd been his favorite, how they'd visited him most often in his final years. The truth was simpler and sadder. Most of them hadn't visited at all. My grandfather had died at 91, sharp-minded until the very end. I'd seen him every Sunday for the past 5 years, bringing him books from the library and playing chess while he told stories about building his real estate empire from nothing. He never mentioned his will. We talked about history, philosophy, current events. He taught me about compound interest and the importance of reading financial statements. He was a good man, my mother said softly beside me. She was the only one who seemed genuinely sad rather than opportunistically grieving. Attorney Edmund Cartwright entered the room, carrying a leather folder. He was 70, silver-haired, and had been my grandfather's lawyer for 4 decades. Behind him walked a younger attorney, maybe 35, carrying a briefcase and a tablet. Thank you all for coming, Cartwright said, settling into his chair at the head of the conference table. I know this is difficult. James Morrison was a remarkable man, and a dear friend. Several people nodded solemnly. Uncle Richard cleared his throat importantly. Cartwright opened the folder. James's will is straightforward in most respects. He's left specific bequests to various charities, his household staff, and some old friends. The bulk of his estate, however, is divided among family members. The room seemed to hold its breath. To his daughter Patricia Morrison Webb, he leaves his collection of first edition books, valued at approximately $80,000, and a cash bequest of $50,000. Patricia smiled, satisfied. The books alone were worth a small fortune, and she'd always loved literature. To his son Michael Morrison, he leaves his vintage automobile collection, currently valued at approximately $200,000, and a cash bequest of $75,000. My uncle Michael grinned. He'd been hoping for those cars. To his son Richard Morrison, he leaves his corporate stock portfolio, currently valued at approximately $400,000, and all contents of his personal office, including artwork and furnishings. Uncle Richard sat back, looking pleased. $400,000 was substantial, and the artwork alone was worth another $100,000 easily. Cartwright continued through the list. Cousins received cash bequests ranging from $20,000 to $50,000. Grandchildren received education trusts. Nieces and nephews received jewelry, antiques, and smaller investments. The amounts were generous but not extravagant. My grandfather had been wealthy, but he hadn't believed in spoiling people. Then Cartwright reached the major assets. To his son Richard Morrison, he leaves the Penthouse condominium at 447 Riverside Drive, currently valued at approximately $2.8 million. The room erupted. Uncle Richard stood up, face flushed with triumph. The penthouse, I knew it. Father always said I had the best business sense in the family. That penthouse was his crown jewel. Family members crowded around him, congratulating him, already talking about celebrations and visits. The penthouse was legendary in our family, 1,500 square feet with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, custom Italian marble, a chef's kitchen, and a rooftop terrace. It occupied the entire 24th floor of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. This is incredible, Richard said, shaking hands and accepting embraces. Absolutely incredible. Father knew I'd appreciate it. That view alone is worth every penny. Melissa pouted. I thought maybe I'd get the penthouse. Don't be ridiculous, Richard said. Father wouldn't leave something this valuable to a grandchild. This requires serious management, serious responsibility. I remained seated, watching the celebration. My mother squeezed my hand. Cartwright waited patiently for the noise to die down. When it didn't, he cleared his throat loudly. If we could return to our seats, please. There are a few more items to address. The family settled back down, though Richard remained standing, chest puffed out like a peacock. Now, Cartwright continued, there are some additional distributions. To his granddaughter Jennifer Morrison, he leaves his complete financial records, all business documents dating back to 1962, and his personal journals. I nodded. That made sense. Grandfather and I had discussed his business philosophy extensively. The journals would be valuable to me historically and personally. He also leaves Jennifer all physical keys, access codes and property documents currently in his personal safe. Richard frowned. Keys to what? The penthouse keys should come to me with the property. We'll get to that, Cartwright said calmly. Now, there's one final bequest that requires some explanation. He nodded to his younger colleague, who opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. The younger attorney, whose name I learned was David Klein, placed the documents on the table. 3 years ago, Cartwright said slowly, James Morrison made a significant transaction that he chose to keep private. He felt strongly that family members should earn their own way, build their own success, just as he had done. Richard sat down, his smile fading slightly. What kind of transaction? In April of 2022, Cartwright continued, James sold his controlling interest in Morrison Holdings to his granddaughter Jennifer Morrison for the sum of $1. The room went completely silent. Morrison Holdings, Cartwright said, is the parent company that owns all of James's commercial real estate, including the building at 447 Riverside Drive. My mother's hand tightened on mine. Richard stood up again, face darkening. That's impossible. Father wouldn't. The transaction was entirely legal and properly recorded. Cartwright interrupted. Morrison Holdings owns 16 commercial properties throughout the city, including 3 apartment buildings, 2 office complexes, and 6 mixed-use developments. The building at 447 Riverside Drive is one of those properties. David Klein pulled out another document. According to the property records filed with the city in April 2022, Jennifer Morrison is the registered owner of the building at 447 Riverside Drive. She has been the legal owner for 3 years and 2 months. The words hung in the air like smoke. Richard's face turned purple. This is fraud. She manipulated him. An old man, clearly not in his right mind. James Morrison was evaluated by 3 independent physicians before the transfer, Cartwright said firmly. All 3 confirmed his complete mental competency. He also recorded a video statement explaining his reasoning, which I'm prepared to play if anyone contests this. Will play it, Richard demanded. Play it right now. Cartwright nodded to Klein, who set up a small projector. The lights dimmed slightly, and my grandfather's face appeared on the screen, sitting in this very office, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, my grandfather's recorded voice said, it means I've passed on, and someone is questioning my decision to transfer Morrison Holdings to my granddaughter Jennifer. His image leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear, I was of sound mind. I knew exactly what I was doing. Jennifer earned this inheritance through dedication, genuine interest, and actual effort. The room was dead silent. For 5 years, Jennifer visited me every Sunday. The recording continued. We didn't just chat about the weather. She asked me about business, about real estate, about market analysis. She read the books I recommended. She took courses in property management and accounting. She studied financial statements in her spare time, not because she expected anything, but because she genuinely wanted to learn. My grandfather smiled on screen. Meanwhile, most of you visited on holidays, if that. You asked about my health and my money, in that order. You made assumptions about inheritance. You planned spending before I was even gone. Richard's jaw clenched. Richard, my grandfather said, as if addressing him directly, you're going to be angry about the penthouse. Let me explain something. That penthouse was never mine to give you. I sold it to Jennifer 3 years ago, along with the entire building, the unit you thought you were inheriting. She's been your landlord since 2022. Several people gasped. Jennifer allowed me to live there rent-free as part of our agreement. The recording continued. She could have sold it, evicted me, done whatever she wanted. Instead, she let an old man keep his home while she quietly managed the entire property portfolio, learning the business from the ground up. The video showed my grandfather picking up a piece of paper. The cash bequests, stocks, artwork, cars, those are yours. I left you generous gifts because you're family, and I loved you. But my business, my life's work, that goes to someone who proved she could handle it. He set the paper down. Jennifer has been managing Morrison Holdings for 3 years. She's negotiated leases, handled maintenance, dealt with tenant complaints, managed contractors, and kept every property running smoothly. Not one of you noticed because you weren't paying attention. My Uncle Michael spoke up. If she owned the building, why didn't she say something? Why the deception? Cartwright stopped the video. Jennifer didn't deceive anyone. She simply didn't announce her business dealings. Would any of you have told the entire family every time you bought or sold property? Silence. Cartwright pressed play again. My grandfather's image smiled. Jennifer maintained confidentiality because I asked her to. I wanted to see who truly cared about me versus who cared about my money. The results were illuminating. He leaned back in his chair. So yes, I was of sound mind. Yes, I knew exactly what I was doing. And yes, I meant every word of this arrangement. Jennifer Morrison has been the owner of Morrison Holdings since April 2022, and she deserves every bit of it. The video ended. The lights came back up. 23 faces stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to anger to grudging respect. Richard found his voice first. This is absolutely unacceptable. I'll contest this will. I'll sue. That penthouse should be mine. You're welcome to try, Cartwright said calmly. But the penthouse transfer happened 3 years ago, well before James's death. It's not part of the will. It's a separate completed transaction, with no legal basis for contest. She probably forged documents, Patricia said. Took advantage of father when he was vulnerable. Mrs. Webb, David Klein interrupted. Your father was 78 when this transaction occurred, not 91. He was still actively running businesses, still sharp as ever. 3 doctors certified his competency. The transaction was witnessed by myself and 2 other attorneys. Every document was properly notarized and filed. There's no legal vulnerability here. Richard turned to me, eyes blazing. You conniving little. Careful, my mother said sharply. That's my daughter you're addressing. She stole my inheritance. Actually, I said quietly, speaking for the first time, grandfather sold me his company 3 years ago for $1. I've been paying all property taxes, handling all management responsibilities, and maintaining all buildings since then. You inherited exactly what grandfather intended, $400,000 in stocks and valuable artwork. That's more than generous. Generous, Richard sputtered. That penthouse is worth nearly $3 million. The building is worth $12 million, I corrected. The penthouse is just one unit. And you're right, I could sell it tomorrow if I wanted to. That's what ownership means. Melissa spoke up. But why you? What makes you so special? I considered the question. I showed up. I listened. I learned. I did the work without expecting anything in return. Grandfather didn't owe me this. He chose to sell me the company because I proved I could handle it. Proved how? Uncle Michael asked, sounding more curious than angry. 3 years ago, one of the apartment buildings had a major plumbing crisis, I said. Pipes burst on a Sunday. Grandfather was out of town. I coordinated emergency repairs, found temporary housing for displaced tenants, negotiated with contractors, and managed insurance claims. I was 25 years old, working my regular job during the week, and handling his real estate emergencies on weekends. I pulled out my phone and opened a spreadsheet. Since taking over Morrison Holdings, I've increased occupancy rates from 78% to 94%. I've reduced operating costs by 18% while improving tenant satisfaction scores. I've renegotiated vendor contracts, upgraded building systems, and increased overall property values by approximately $2.3 million. David Klein nodded. We've reviewed Miss Morrison's management records. They're exceptional. The portfolio has never been healthier. But she's 28, Patricia protested. She can't possibly have the experience. I'm 28 with a business degree, property management certification, and 3 years of hands-on experience managing a $12 million portfolio, I said. How much real estate management experience do you have, Aunt Patricia? She had no answer. Richard tried again. This isn't fair. Father should have divided everything equally. Why? I asked simply. Why should someone who visited twice a year receive the same as someone who visited every week? Why should someone who never showed interest in the business inherit the business? Because we're family. Exactly, my mother said quietly. We're family, and Dad loved us all. That's why he left everyone something meaningful. Richard, You got stocks and artwork worth $500,000. Patricia got rare books she's always treasured. Michael got the car collection he's wanted since childhood. Everyone received generous gifts. She stood up, facing her brother, but Jennifer earned the business. She put in the time, did the work, and proved herself capable. Dad didn't owe any of us his life's work. He chose to give it to someone he trusted to preserve his legacy. Some legacy, Richard muttered, leaving a fortune to someone barely out of college. Cartwright closed his folder. Jennifer Morrison graduated summa cum laude with degrees in business and finance. She worked full-time while getting her property management certification. She spent 5 years learning directly from one of the most successful real estate developers in the city. She's more qualified at 28 than most people at 40. He stood up. Now, unless anyone has legitimate legal questions, not complaints, but actual questions, I believe we're finished here. Melissa raised her hand tentatively. I have a question. Yes, does this mean Jennifer owns my apartment? I've been living in one of the Riverside buildings for 2 years. I nodded. Unit 14C. You've been a good tenant. Rent's always on time. No complaints. No damage. I'd be happy to renew your lease when it comes up next spring. Her eyes widened. You knew I lived there. I know every tenant in every building. It's my job. Uncle Michael leaned forward. What about my office? I lease commercial space on 7th Avenue, Morrison Towers, 8th floor. I confirmed. Your lease runs through next year. I approved your recent renovation requests personally. He sat back, looking stunned. I thought some property management company handled that. Morrison Property Management, I said. That's me. I operate under the company name for professionalism. But yes, I personally review every lease, every request, every issue. Patricia frowned. How did we not know this? Because you never asked, my mother said simply. Jennifer never hid anything. She just didn't announce it. Cartwright gathered his documents. If there are no further questions, I'll need Jennifer to sign some final papers confirming receipt of the documents from James's safe. Everyone else, you'll receive your bequests within 30 days after the standard probate procedures. The family began filing out slowly, some still looking angry, others thoughtful. Melissa approached me hesitantly. I'm sorry for what I said earlier, she said, about expecting the penthouse. That was presumptuous. It's okay, I said. Grandfather liked creating drama. He enjoyed testing people. Will you really renew my lease? Of course, you're a good tenant. Why wouldn't I? She smiled uncertainly. I guess I thought you might be angry with the family. I'm not angry with anyone, I said honestly. Disappointed maybe, but not angry. Grandfather made his choices based on who we all showed ourselves to be. That's not your fault or mine. After most people left, Richard approached me one last time. His face was still red, but his voice was calmer. This isn't over, he said. I'm going to have lawyers review every document. If there's even a hint of impropriety, you won't find any, I said. But you're welcome to look. Grandfather made sure everything was airtight precisely because he knew you'd react this way. He knew, he predicted your exact words, almost verbatim. He knew you'd feel entitled to the penthouse. That's why he recorded the video. Richard shook his head. I just don't understand. I'm his son. You're just his granddaughter. I was his student. I corrected. I was his friend. I was the person who listened when he talked about his life's work. You're right that you're his son, and he loved you. But love doesn't equal inheritance. Not when there's a business at stake. He left without another word. My mother and I were the last to leave besides the attorneys. Cartwright pulled me aside. Your grandfather would be proud, he said. You handled that with grace. I had 3 years to prepare, I admitted. Grandfather warned me this would be ugly. It could get uglier. Richard wasn't bluffing about lawyers. I know, but everything's legitimate, right? Completely. I made sure of it myself. He handed me a key. This is to your grandfather's safe deposit box. He said you'd know what to do with the contents. After signing the final papers, my mother and I walked out into the cooling afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Are you okay? She asked. I think so. It's just a lot. $12 million worth of a lot. I laughed. It's not really 12 million. It's 16 buildings, 247 tenants, countless contractors, maintenance schedules, insurance policies, property taxes, and constant problems to solve. Sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also exactly what I want to do. We walked in silence for a while. Then my mother said, your grandfather told me about the transfer when it happened. I wanted to warn you about today, but he made me promise not to. He enjoyed his secrets. He did, but he also genuinely believed you were the right choice, not because you were his favorite, but because you were competent. High praise from grandfather, the highest. She squeezed my arm. He also set aside money for my retirement, that he made me promise not to mention. Said you had enough to worry about without feeling responsible for your mother too. I stopped walking. He did. Enough that I can retire comfortably and travel like I've always wanted. He took care of all of us, honey, in exactly the ways we needed, whether we appreciated it or not. We reached my car, a modest sedan I'd bought used 3 years ago. I could afford better now, but the car worked fine, and I'd learned from grandfather that true wealth wasn't about displays. What happens now? My mother asked. Now I go home, review the documents from the safe, and probably deal with angry phone calls from various relatives. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I have a meeting with the contractors renovating the lobby at Morrison Towers, a lease negotiation for the commercial space on Fifth Avenue, and an appointment to interview a new building superintendent. My mother smiled. Sounds like a normal day. It is. This is my normal now. Has been for 3 years. I drove her home and then headed to my own apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in one of my buildings where I paid market rate rent because grandfather had insisted I never give myself special treatment. Inside I made tea, and opened the folder of documents Cartwright had given me. Along with property deeds and legal papers, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it in grandfather's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 1 week before his death. Jennifer, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just sat through the most uncomfortable family meeting of your life. I'm sorry for that, but not really. They needed to know the truth, and you needed to establish your authority. By now Richard has threatened to sue. Patricia has called you manipulative, and at least 3 people have questioned your qualifications. Don't let it bother you. They'll come around, or they won't. Either way, you have work to do. I didn't give you Morrison Holdings because you're my granddaughter. I gave it to you because you're the only one who cared enough to learn what I spent 60 years building. You asked questions, you read books, you studied market trends and maintenance schedules and tenant relations. You treated my life's work with respect. The others wanted the results of my success without understanding the work behind it. Richard wants the penthouse because it's valuable, not because he appreciates what it took to build that building. Patricia wants money because it's comfortable, not because she understands how to preserve wealth. You understand both the work and the responsibility. That's rare. I've set up Morrison Holdings to last generations if managed properly. You have everything you need. Solid properties, good tenants, reliable contractors, and enough cash reserves to handle emergencies. The business is sound. What you don't have yet is confidence. You'll question yourself, especially after today. You'll wonder if you deserve this, if you're too young, if you made mistakes. Let me answer those questions now. Yes, you deserve it. No, you're not too young. Yes, you've made mistakes, and you'll make more. That's how you learn. Run the business your way. I won't be looking over your shoulder, and you shouldn't imagine I am. This is yours now. Make it better than I did. One last thing, in the safe deposit box, you'll find bearer bonds worth approximately $200,000. Those aren't part of Morrison Holdings. They're personal funds I set aside for you. Use them however you want. Business expansion, personal enjoyment, emergency reserves, whatever feels right. No strings attached. I'm proud of you, Jennifer. Not because of what you've inherited, but because of who you've become. You're kind, intelligent, hardworking, and honest. Those traits are worth more than any portfolio. Don't let today's ugliness make you doubt yourself. You've earned everything you have. Love, grandfather. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. Thank you for being kind today. Let me know about that lease renewal. Then one from Uncle Michael. Your grandfather was right. You earned this. Good luck. Nothing from Richard, but I hadn't expected anything. I made a list of tasks for the coming week. Finalize the lobby renovation, review quarterly financials, schedule maintenance inspections, and prepare for lease negotiations. Normal business, my business. The penthouse incident was already becoming a story I'd tell someday, about the day my family learned I'd been their landlord all along. But the real story was quieter. 5 years of Sunday afternoons, hundreds of hours learning about real estate, and 3 years of proving I could handle the responsibility I'd been given. Grandfather had built an empire. Now it was my job to maintain it, improve it, and eventually pass it on to someone who would appreciate it the way I had. I looked at the city lights outside my window, thinking about the 16 buildings I owned across this skyline. Each one represented tenants who needed reliable management, property that required maintenance, and a legacy that deserved respect. Tomorrow I'd get back to work. Tonight I'd allow myself to feel the weight of what I'd inherited, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd earned it. My phone buzzed again. My property manager at Morrison Towers. Leak in Unit 12B. Tenants need emergency response. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The work never stopped, but that was exactly how I wanted it. The salt air felt different that morning, sharper, almost metallic with the scent of diesel fuel and impending destruction. I stood on the weathered deck of the beach house, watching the sun rise over the Atlantic, while my family orchestrated what they believed would be my final humiliation. Maya, you really should leave now. My mother called from the driveway, her voice carrying that particular tone of manufactured concern she'd perfected over the years. The crew needs to start working, and I'd hate for you to see this. It must be so difficult for you. I took another sip of my coffee, French roast, imported from a little shop in Portland, that I'd discovered during a business trip 3 years ago. The same trip where I'd signed the papers that made me a very different person than my family believed me to be. I'm fine right here, Mom. My brother Derek laughed from where he stood next to Dad's Mercedes. At 35, he'd spent the last decade riding our father's coattails through mediocre real estate deals and country club connections. Still in denial, I see. Classic Maya. The house is coming down today, whether you accept it or not. Dad emerged from his car with blueprints tucked under his arm, looking every inch the successful developer he believed himself to be. Robert Harrison, founder of Harrison Coastal Properties, had built his reputation on transforming underutilized beachfront assets into luxury developments. The fact that this particular asset had been in our family for 40 years meant nothing to him. Gentlemen, he addressed the construction crew with the booming authority he used in boardrooms. Thank you for accommodating our early start time. As you can see, this structure has significant deterioration, foundation issues, outdated electrical, probable mold in the walls. It's actually a safety hazard at this point. I almost smiled. The house had been renovated 18 months ago. New foundation, completely rewired, state-of-the-art moisture barriers. I had the invoices to prove it, filed neatly in my attorney's office, along with several other documents my family knew nothing about. The new build will be spectacular, Mom added, walking around the property with her phone out, taking pictures. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, infinity pool. We're calling it Harrison's Retreat. It'll be the crown jewel of the coastline. The foreman, a weathered man in his 50s with a coastal demolition company jacket, studied his work order with a frown. Mr. Harrison, I need to verify something. The property deed on file shows. All handled, Dad interrupted smoothly. The title company confirmed everything yesterday. This property has been in my family for decades. My daughter was living here temporarily, but the ownership structure was always clear. That was the story he'd been telling for months. That Grandpa Joe had left the house in a family trust, that I'd been allowed to stay here out of charity, that the decision to demolish and rebuild was unanimous among the actual stakeholders. All lies. But I'd let him tell them, let him hire architects and contractors, let him spend $60,000 on permits and engineering reports, let him stand here this morning with his blueprints and his vision of Harrison's Retreat, believing he was hours away from his greatest triumph. Derek walked up the deck steps, his expensive loafers loud on the wood. I'd personally helped refinish 2 summers ago. You know, Maya, if you'd just gotten a real job instead of playing around with your little consulting thing, maybe you could afford your own place. Then this wouldn't be so painful for you. My little consulting thing, Summit Strategy Group, which had been operating for 7 years now, employing 43 people across 3 offices, with annual revenues that would make Derek's eyes water. But to my family, it was just Maya playing business, wasting time she should have spent finding a husband, or joining Dad's company in some suitably feminine administrative role. I appreciate your concern, Derek. Don't patronize me. His face reddened the way it always did when he felt disrespected. You've always thought you were better than us. Too good for the family business. Too good to listen to Dad's advice. And where has it gotten you? You're about to be homeless. The lead bulldozer operator climbed into his cab, the engine roaring to life with a mechanical growl that sent seagulls scattering from the nearby dunes. My mother actually clapped her hands together, barely able to contain her excitement. Robert, you should record this, she said, for the company's social media. Out with the old, in with the extraordinary. That could be our tagline. I finished my coffee and set the mug down on the deck railing. The ceramic was from a set Grandpa Joe had bought in 1983, each piece hand-painted with different seashells. My family had already tagged everything inside the house for disposal. 40 years of memories, destined for a landfill. Mr. Harrison, the foreman tried again, holding up his tablet. I really need to resolve this discrepancy. The property records I'm seeing online show. I assure you everything is in order. Dad's voice had an edge now. Time was money, and he was paying these men by the hour. I have the documentation in my car if you need to see it. I'd appreciate that, sir. We can't proceed until I verify ownership. Dad's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional smile. Of course, Derek, get the folder from the back seat. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not with anger or vindictiveness, but with the calm certainty that comes from having every fact, every document, every legal detail on your side. I'd learned that from Grandpa Joe, who taught me that real power doesn't announce itself with raised voices and aggressive posturing. Real power is quiet, documented, and absolute. I walked down the deck steps and crossed the sandy driveway to where the foreman stood with his tablet. Up close I could see his name badge. Thomas Werner, site supervisor. Mr. Werner, I said quietly, before Mr. Harrison, waste your time with whatever documents he has. I need to show you something. I pulled out my phone and opened the secure app that connected directly to my attorney's document management system. County property records, updated as of 24 hours ago. Current and complete. The foreman looked at the screen, and I watched his expression change from confusion to understanding to professional concern. The property at 847 Coastal Highway, I said, is owned by Horizon Holdings LLC. Has been for the past 6 years. I'm the sole member and manager of that LLC. The deed is recorded with the county. The property taxes are current. There are no liens, no encumbrances, no claims against the title. Thomas Werner scrolled through the documents, his frown deepening with each page. Miss Harrison, this shows Miss Foster, I corrected. I went back to my mother's maiden name, 3 years ago, and yes, that shows exactly what I said. I own this house, completely and exclusively. Derek returned with Dad's folder, triumph on his face. Here's all the proof you need. Family trust documents, transfer agreements, the whole. He stopped when he saw the foreman's expression. What's going on, sir? Thomas Werner said carefully. I need you to look at this. He held out the tablet. Dad took it, confidence still radiating from him like cologne. That confidence lasted about 15 seconds, until his brain processed what his eyes were seeing. This is wrong, he said flatly. This is some kind of mistake. The title company verified. What title company? I asked. Did you actually hire one, Dad? Or did you just assume that because you wanted something to be true, it was? My mother rushed over, her heels sinking into the sandy gravel. Robert, what's happening? Why aren't they starting? There appears to be an ownership issue, Thomas Werner said diplomatically. Miss Foster is showing documentation that she owns this property through an LLC. Until we resolve this, we cannot proceed with demolition. An LLC, Derek's voice went up an octave. Maya doesn't have an LLC. She doesn't have anything. She's broke. I pulled out a second document on my phone. Horizon Holdings LLC was established in January 2019. Registered with the state, properly filed, annual reports up to date. The company acquired this property from Joseph Harrison's estate for the sum of $1.2 million, paid in full, cash transaction. Deed recorded February 15, 2019. The date landed like a physical blow. February 15, 2019. 3 weeks after Grandpa Joe died. The reading of the will had been February 22. Mom's face went pale, but the will said the house went to the family trust. The attorney read it out loud. We were all there. The will said the house would be offered to the family trust. I corrected. At fair market value, with a 30-day right of first refusal. I made an offer on day 15. Grandpa Joe's estate attorney, who by the way was not your attorney, Dad, but an independent executor appointed by the probate court, accepted my offer on day 20. With what money? Derek demanded. You were working some nothing job, living paycheck to paycheck. Where did you get $1.2 million? This was the part I'd actually looked forward to. The moment when they realized just how thoroughly they'd misjudged me. Summit Strategy Group had its first major client in 2017. I said. A pharmaceutical company that needed help navigating FDA approval for a new drug delivery system. Our consulting fees for that project were $800,000. By the end of 2018, we had 7 corporate clients and revenues exceeding $3.4 million. I took a salary of $180,000 and put the rest back into the business, except for $1.2 million, which I set aside for something that mattered to me. The bulldozer engine was still running, but the operator had cut the throttle, clearly sensing the drama unfolding. The rest of the crew stood around their trucks, watching. Dad found his voice, though it came out strained. Joe would never have sold to you without telling us. He wouldn't have gone behind our backs like that. He didn't go behind anyone's back. The estate sale was completely legal and properly advertised. Any member of the family could have made an offer. You all just assumed that because you wanted the house, you'd get it. Grandpa Joe taught me something you never learned. Assumption is not the same as ownership. I pulled up another document. This is the title insurance policy, issued by Commonwealth Title Company, confirming clear title. This is the property survey, completed in March 2019, showing the exact boundaries of the parcel. This is the most recent property tax statement, showing taxes paid in full through 2026. And this, I scrolled to a final page, is the notice of trespass I'm prepared to file if you don't remove your vehicles and equipment from my property within the next 30 minutes. Thomas Werner cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, I'm very sorry, but we cannot proceed. The documentation Miss Foster is showing clearly establishes her ownership. If we were to demolish a structure without verified owner authorization, we'd be liable for— I understand, Dad said coldly. He turned to me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't disappointment or dismissal. It was genuine shock. How long have you been planning this? I haven't been planning anything. I bought the house because I loved it and wanted to preserve it. I didn't tell you because you never asked. You just assumed, made your plans, and expected everyone to go along with them. That's always been your approach. We're family, Mom said, her voice breaking. Family doesn't do this to each other. You let us spend money on permits, on architects, on your assumptions, I finished. I never told you this house was yours. I never agreed to any demolition. You decided what you wanted reality to be, and got angry when reality didn't comply. Derek's face had gone from red to purple. You sneaky manipulative. Careful, I said quietly. We're on my property. I can have you removed for harassment. Thomas Werner was already signaling his crew. Pack it up, guys. Job's cancelled. He turned to my father with genuine sympathy. Sir, I'm sorry for the confusion. We'll need to charge you for the mobilization costs, but we'll waive the standby time. This situation is unprecedented. Keep the full fee, Dad said distantly. He was staring at the house like he'd never seen it before. You showed up ready to work. It's not your fault the job was based on false information. False information you created yourself, I pointed out. Nobody lied to you, Dad. You just never bothered to check your assumptions. The crews were loading their equipment. The moment of demolition transformed into a retreat. My mother stood crying quietly, her perfect makeup beginning to run. Derek paced near the cars, talking rapidly on his phone, probably to his attorney. Dad walked over to where I stood, close enough that the workers couldn't hear. I underestimated you. You didn't estimate me at all. That's different. What do you want? Money. We can discuss a fair price for the property. I'll match what you paid plus appreciation. The house isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, Maya. Name your price. I looked at him. This man who'd spent my entire life trying to mold me into something I wasn't, who'd dismissed my successes and amplified my failures, who'd been so certain of his own importance that he'd never noticed when his daughter built something real. Some things aren't about money, Dad. This house is where Grandpa Joe taught me to fish, where he showed me how to read tide charts and identify seabirds, where he told me that the ocean doesn't care about your last name or your bank account. It just is. Powerful and patient, and completely indifferent to human ego. So this is revenge, making me look foolish. You made yourself look foolish. I just didn't stop you. I pulled up one more document on my phone. This is the renovation permit I pulled in 2023. New foundation, complete electrical upgrade, structural reinforcement to handle Category 4 hurricane winds. I've invested another $340,000 into this house. It's not deteriorating. It's not a safety hazard. It's probably the soundest structure on this stretch of coastline. Thomas Werner approached with a clipboard. Mr. Harrison, I need your signature acknowledging the cancellation. Dad signed without looking at the paper. The bulldozers were already pulling out, their potential for destruction rendered useless by the simple reality of property law. Derek stormed over, his phone still pressed to his ear. My attorney says we can challenge the estate sale. Undue influence, exploitation of an elderly man, fraud. Your attorney is welcome to try, I said. Grandpa Joe was 78 when he died, in full possession of his faculties, with an independent executor handling his estate. The sale was at fair market value, properly documented, with a waiting period that exceeded legal requirements. But sure, waste more money on legal fees. It seems to be a family specialty. Mom had stopped crying, and was now just staring at me like I was a stranger. I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm the same person I've always been. You just never paid attention. We're your family. We deserve to know. What did you deserve to know? That I started a successful business. I told you about Summit Strategy Group dozens of times. You called it my little consulting thing, and changed the subject. That I could afford this house. You never asked about my finances. You just assumed I was struggling because that fit your narrative better. A black BMW pulled into the driveway, and my attorney stepped out. Jennifer Park, 45 years old, senior partner at Park & Associates, with a reputation for being absolutely meticulous about property law. Miss Foster, she called out. I got your text. Is there a problem? No problem, I said. Just clarifying. Ownership for some confused parties. Jennifer walked over to my father with her briefcase. Mr. Harrison, I'm Jennifer Park. I represent Miss Foster and Horizon Holdings LLC. I understand there was an attempt to demolish my client's property this morning. Dad's professional mask finally cracked. There was a misunderstanding about ownership. A misunderstanding that cost my client significant emotional distress, not to mention the expense of having her attorney drive out here on a Saturday morning. Jennifer pulled out her own tablet. I have documentation here that shows my client has owned this property free and clear since February 2019. She's paid all taxes, maintained insurance, and invested substantially in improvements. Your demolition permit, which I've reviewed, was issued based on a fraudulent ownership claim. Fraudulent is a strong word. You told the county you owned this property. You don't. That's fraud, Mr. Harrison. The county takes that very seriously. Derek jumped in. We had a good faith belief. Based on what? Did you check the property records? Did you verify the deed? Or did you just assume that because you wanted something, it belonged to you? My mother found her voice. This is all so unnecessary. Maya, we can work this out as a family. We'll sit down, discuss everything calmly. There's nothing to discuss, I said. This is my house. I'm keeping it. Your plans for Harrison's retreat will need to find a different location. You're being incredibly selfish, Derek said. This property could have been worth $8 million once we developed it. You're costing the family a fortune because of some sentimental attachment. I'm not costing the family anything. I'm keeping my property. If you want to develop beachfront real estate, buy your own land. Dad was looking at the blueprints in his hands, probably calculating how much time and money he'd wasted. The investors are going to pull out. We promised them this specific location, the sightlines, the beach access, not my problem, I said simply. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mr. Harrison, my client would be willing to forgo legal action regarding the fraudulent permit, if you agree, in writing, never to make any future claims on this property. We'll need that signed today. I'll have my attorney review. No review. Sign it now, or Miss Foster files a complaint with the county, and possibly a civil suit for the emotional distress and attorney fees she's incurring today. Dad looked at me, and for a moment I saw him actually consider fighting. But he was a businessman, and businessmen know when the numbers don't work. He took Jennifer's pen and signed the document. I'll need copies for my records, he said stiffly. I'll email them to you. Jennifer tucked the signed agreement into her briefcase. Miss Foster, anything else you need? No thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you coming out. That's what you pay me for. Call if they cause any further problems. She nodded professionally to my parents and left. The driveway was suddenly very quiet. The demolition crew was gone. The bulldozers were gone. It was just my family standing on my property, facing the reality that their assumptions had been shattered. I think you should leave now, I said calmly. I have work to do inside. Work? Mom's voice was small. On a Saturday. Summit Strategy Group has a major client presentation Monday. I need to finalize the analysis. The consulting thing is real, Derek asked, still trying to process. $7.2 million in revenue last year, 43 employees, offices in Portland, Boston and Atlanta. Very real. Dad straightened his shoulders, trying to salvage some dignity. I suppose congratulations are in order. For your business success. Thank you, though I have to say this whole situation could have been avoided with better communication. I almost laughed. You're right. If you'd communicated with me at all, instead of making assumptions and sending me updates about your demolition timeline, this could have been avoided. You could have asked, Maya, do you own this house? I would have said yes, and we'd have skipped this entire embarrassing scene. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. So what happens now? Do we just not see each other anymore? That's up to you. My door is open, but not for people who think they can bulldoze my life to suit their plans. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on who I actually am, not who you wish I was. Derek was already walking to his car. This is insane. You've always been difficult, Maya, but this is next level. Goodbye, Derek. He left without another word, tires spinning in the gravel. My parents stood there a moment longer, looking lost and small, in a way I'd never seen before. Your grandfather would be proud of you, Dad said finally. He always said you had his head for business. He did, you just never listened. They walked to their Mercedes in silence. Mom paused before getting in. The house looks beautiful, by the way. The renovations, from what I could see. Thank you. Maybe we could visit sometime, just to see what you've done with it. I considered that. Maybe when you're ready to see it as my home, instead of your missed opportunity. She nodded and got in the car. Dad started the engine but didn't leave immediately. Through the windshield, I could see him looking at the house, probably reimagining the last 6 years with accurate information instead of assumptions. Then they were gone, and I was alone with the sound of the waves and the cry of seagulls. I walked back inside my house, my completely and totally owned house, and stood in the living room where Grandpa Joe's seashell mug still sat on display. The morning sun streamed through the new energy-efficient windows I'd installed, illuminating the refinished hardwood floors and the framed photographs of 3 generations of our family. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Property rights established. They won't be back. Well done. I texted back a thank you, and sat down at the kitchen table, where I'd spent countless mornings with my grandfather, learning about tides and business, and the importance of understanding what you actually own, versus what you just think you deserve. My laptop was already open to the presentation for Monday's client meeting. A pharmaceutical company needed help navigating FDA approval for a new cancer treatment. The fees would be substantial, but more importantly, the work mattered. Real problems, real solutions, real impact. That's what Grandpa Joe had taught me. Success isn't about looking impressive or building monuments to your ego. It's about doing actual work that solves actual problems for actual people. The beach house would stand, the waves would keep rolling in, and somewhere in the city, my family would have to reconcile their assumptions with reality. I had work to do.